everyone. I am so sorry about the technical difficulties. We are back, and I'm so excited to be able to talk with Gabby. We are going to talk about living in Cuba, escaping it, and why she loves America, like so many Cubans tend to do. If you're like me, you haven't heard a lot about the Cuban experience. It's like it was hidden. For me, I found that kind of weird because I was in high school when it was happening, and it should have been a subject that we were talking about in our classes. So it makes you wonder how long things that we should know have kind of been hidden from us. So Gabby is like me here in Utah. She's a patriot and a massive fighter, massive person who loves this country. She runs the organization Youth for Liberty. And I'm really excited to hear her story. Feel free to put questions in the comments, and I will try to get to as many as possible. Welcome, Gabby. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Carrie, and good evening, everyone.
So I know you just said it, but let's start again with just talking about your life growing up in Cuba.
Yeah, so just to make sure we are on the same page. So the Cuban regime has been in power for almost 70 years now. So in my family, there has been three generations that have lived under the regime. And each one of these generations have a different perspective. We have lived through different seasons of this dictatorship, which at the end of the day is um, always being characterized by the lack of freedom. No freedom to choose what you want to eat, what you want to buy, sell. No freedom to speak, of course. No freedom to choose what you want to watch on TV. No freedom of the press, no freedom of religion, no freedom of anything. You are basically controlled by the government, and the government in Cuba is the owner of everything, even the land, the seas that surround the island. We're not even able to fish in Cuba. We're not allowed to do it. We're not allowed to kill our own cows, to eat their beef, to sell it. If you are a beekeeper, you have to sell the honey to the government. You cannot sell it to your neighbor, your own family. Same goes for the crops, for any animal that you take care of. You don't own it. So in Cuba, I never had regular milk, for example. The first time I had regular milk was when I was 18 years old and I was outside of Cuba. You get milk until you are 7 years old, but it's only powder milk. They give you the ration card, and with that card, you can buy a certain amount of food per month, like one bread per person a day, 5 eggs per person a month, a little bit of cooking oil, potatoes once or twice a year. I remember when we got potatoes, my sister and I were so happy to eat French fries. First, we had to look for some oil in the black markets to cook them with. And second, my parents and my grandma would give up their potatoes so that my sister and I could have more and eat more French fries. So it's just a little things in the daily life that we have here in America and we don't really appreciate. We just take it for granted because it's so affordable, so easy for everybody, to have them. And and yeah, so one day, for example, here in America, I was eating a bagel with cream cheese and some strawberries. None of those three foods exist in Cuba. So I never had them before. And I stopped for a second. I looked at it and I was like, wow, I'm really eating this. And I don't think about it every day. So every day when I pray or, I remember something from Cuba, I try to be thankful for what I have here. Because if I was still in Cuba, I could have never known that those things existed. I couldn't enjoy life. When you are not free, you cannot really enjoy life because, first of all, you cannot dream, you cannot set goals, you cannot have hope of your future. Um,
Tell me about so you told me that your parents worked in the travel industry. Your father worked at the front desk, your mother was a waitress, and they would tell you stories about the tourists. One thing, I used to work in hotels at the front desk, and we would definitely have opinions of the people who would come in. Did your parents have opinions? Did they think that like Americans were spoiled or other people from other countries?
Not at all.
They
My
didn't.
parents, no,
Okay.
for us Cubans, anybody from any country would be like a god, basically. because they were the ones that had the dollars. They were the ones that could give us something to eat or to get cured from an illness if they had some medicine. So my parents looked forward every day at work to make a friendship with some tourists that could help us somehow, even to get out of Cuba. I remember when I was very young, my dad made this friend at the hotel. It was a couple, a married couple from France, and my dad showed them the reality in Cuba because tourists don't really get to see what Cuba is like. And this couple felt so bad for us that they came back to Cuba a few years later with bags full of toys, stuffed animals, toothbrushes, toothpaste, Barbies.
Wow.
And for us, for my sister and I, that was like a dream when we saw those toys. And those were the only toys we ever had. When I left Cuba, those were still the toys I had. I was 18 years, 17 years old, and I give them away to my cousins. And I was always so grateful for that. Tourists were a hope for my parents and for us as a family. And the jobs that my parents had were very helpful in that kind of society or system. My dad, for example, he used to steal the toilet paper from the rooms whenever the tourists left, or the shampoo bottles. And thanks to that, we had toilet paper sometimes at home. And whenever we went to the countryside to visit my family, we brought some toilet paper as well. Of course, this wasn't something that we had every day, but whenever we had it, we were so happy and thankful for it. Another thing that we were very thankful for these jobs that my parents had with tourists, was to know about the outside world, what the rest of the world was like. Because in Cuba, you don't really get to see or to learn much about other countries. When I was in Cuba, I was 17 years old when I learned that we were finally going to leave Cuba. And I remember my cousin had a laptop with Wikipedia. We didn't have internet in Cuba, but she had Wikipedia. And I remember going in there and learning about a king in Spain, for example. And I click on a link to learn more about it, and I couldn't because we didn't have internet. So I was so excited to leave Cuba so that I could learn more about this king and things that don't matter much now that we're here. But back in Cuba, everything mattered. I remember my grandma had an atlas from the 1980s or so. And when I learned I was living in Cuba, I started learning the capitals of the world, of every country. And I thought that if I learned that when I left Cuba, people weren't going to notice that I wasn't smart because I didn't know anything. Well, to my surprise, even though I learned pretty much every capital of the world, when I left Cuba, I realized that those capitals had changed.
Oh my goodness.
So
You were looking
there
like
was no point.
right.
Most of them, there was no point in learning them. We were so behind in time, so behind in knowledge, in everything. I had to relearn so many things when I left Cuba, from history to geography to politics. They don't teach you politics or economics in Cuba. So when I went to college here in America, I almost didn't pass my macroeconomics and microeconomics class. I barely passed them because I couldn't understand what demand and supply were.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I didn't understand anything at all.
So tell
And
me what was school like growing up? Before,
yeah, so it's all brainwashing. Since you're very little, they teach you to write good letters, or not letters, like drafts, or
like essay?
you like essays. Yes, that's the
Okay.
word. Right? Like essays about heroes of the revolution. So, for example, Che Guevara, that we know is a communist, a killer, very bad person. We had to write a lot of good descriptions of him. He was an honest man. He was sincere man. He was brave. He was this and that. And the more you put about that hero, the better grade you got at the end. So since you're very little, you have to write good about these communist people. Every day at school, you had to say, "Pioneers for communism. I will be like Che Guevara." They don't teach you the bad side of the story of Che Guevara.
So is Pioneers for Communism like the young pioneers in Russia? Okay.
Yes, yes, the same thing.
Okay.
Cuba pretty much copied everything from the Soviet Union.
Oh,
So yeah, Cuba was the student of the Soviet Union, and after communism started, Soviet Union was a very good friend of Cuba, and My mom tells me that back then they used to eat better before the Soviet Union fell.
They called it,
After
I
that,
think, the time of trouble or something like that, the trouble time. It's just something I was looking at right before talking with you, but I think they called it the trouble time, um, right as, the Soviet Union fell, that Cuba went through a really, really hard time.
yeah, it was the special period
That's it. Yeah, okay.
right after the Soviet Union fell,
The special
and
period, that's
yeah,
those are some interesting words.
and you can hear my mom and my mom's generation talking, my parents' generations talking about how they used to eat these cans of meat and cans of pears and peaches, and so even though they were still hungry during the special period, it was even worse because they didn't have those canned good from Soviet Union.
How long was that?
So
How long did that last, the special period?
um, it never ended. It never ended because Cuba hasn't been able to recover. Cuba cannot produce. A communist state cannot produce. They want to depend. They have to depend on
On
other
the
countries
state.
in order to survive. So while the government people, the regime people, live like kings and queens, the people in general they don't have anything. Everything we produce is for the king and queen. You know. So
Yeah.
the system doesn't work. That's it. It's impossible.
How did they fall for it? Like, I was just talking to somebody from Venezuela, and, well, and I know Carlos, right? And so I've heard that they use those terms. They used, "We need to be more equitable, we need to be more fair." Was Cuba ever in that situation? Were they ever a very wealthy country that Yes, they were.
Yes, Cuba was very prosperous country. In
Okay.
fact, if you look at pictures of Cuba back then before communism, it looked like Las Vegas in the
Yeah.
capital. Lights and Christmas signs and advertisement and Coca-Cola, and I never had Coca-Cola until I left Cuba. So it didn't exist there. So it was a prosperous country, and it was one of the first countries to have TV, to have radio, a lot of things that were happening in Cuba, good transportation, and my grandma got to live that time in Cuba. She lived 20 years before communism. So she actually got to experience that capitalism, and she went to movie theaters, and she wasn't rich. She was just the daughter of a farmer, didn't have much money, and she still had a good life, and she told me about that. And Cubans didn't actually fell for it, I would say, because we didn't get to vote for it. There
Okay.
were not elections. Fidel Castro did a coup d'etat, and basically they forced themselves into power.
Mhm.
Yes, there were many people that believed in him, and that's because before him there was a dictatorship in Cuba, the Batista dictatorship. Even though things were so nice, modern and stuff, it was a dictatorship. People couldn't speak freely, couldn't vote freely, and they wanted a change. And communists came to power and were able to unite so many people for that revolution by telling people that they needed to make everybody equal. There were poor people in Cuba and rich people in Cuba, like anywhere else in the world.
Mhm.
But they made people believe that they could actually make everybody equal. But instead, what happened was that, of course, the revolution people got rich while the rest of the people were poor. My grandma believed in the revolution. She supported the revolution. But after a few years into it, she realized it wasn't good. First of all, because she couldn't baptize her kids. She couldn't go to church because she could lose her job or go to jail.
Did they close down the churches?
Yeah, they didn't close them down, but they would persecute religious people. They didn't let you practice. They didn't let you celebrate Christmas. I think it was until 1997, so from like 1959 that communism started until 1997 that we were not allowed to celebrate Christmas.
Oh,
By
wow.
then, it was already too late. People already had forgotten who Christ was and the meaning of Christmas, the meaning of getting together at home and just remembering Christ. And,
So, because it started off as a Christian and specifically a Catholic nation, correct?
yeah.
And that was stripped from them.
Yeah, they didn't want anybody to believe in God at all.
Because if you believe in God, then the state cannot become your God.
Yeah, well, and communism comes from Marxism. Fidel was a Marxist, even though he denied it. And Marxists believe that religion is the opium of the world.
Right?
Religion deceives the people and stuff
I'm
like
just
that.
gonna clarify that just in case anyone didn't hear. Religion is the opium of the world in a Marxist, which is why they need to get rid of it. It's like they literally think of you as an addict, somebody who cannot uh, cope with the realities of the world. And so you soothe yourself just like an addict, which is kind of crazy because a lot of these people uh, push for policies that allow drug addicts to, roam the streets. But your faith is too extreme.
Yeah, no, and I saw with my own eyes how bad it is to eliminate society, I mean, religion from society for so long. Because my generation, most of the people from my generation don't believe in anything. They live hopeless. And I was lucky or blessed to have a grandma that was Catholic before the revolution. And even after the revolution, she still believed in God, even though she didn't go to church. And she taught me who God was. She taught me to pray. She taught me that God was always watching. Even though my parents weren't that faithful, my dad was an atheist and my mom didn't believe as much. I still had that spirit with me, that, that belief, that faith. And I was protected by it. I know I was protected by it. Um, I grew up in a society where people had lost all values. Abortion is legal and is free, so it's very normal that when you're pregnant, people ask you, "Are you going to keep it?" Instead of saying,
Is it a boy or
"Congrats."
girl? Yeah.
Yeah. So it was. I was the different one. I was the person that didn't have an abortion. But I would have probably had one if I didn't left on time in Cuba. If I had stayed in Cuba, I would have probably had an abortion.
Yeah. That's a hard one because, there's so many people, especially here, it's a very, very, very pro-life culture. Um, but when you strip people of hope and you strip people of worth, I can completely see why they would say, what would be the point? The nihilism. I wonder is there a high suicide rate?
They don't talk much about that on TV or anywhere. But
Okay.
I heard a couple of stories, like this person got suicide and killed himself. But they don't talk as much about it.
You just wonder, and that's another thing, like, here in America, it's all fragility all the time, right? It's all, like, our mental health, it's things like that. Whereas in, just a second, um, in Cuba or in other countries where they've actually really went through hard things, it's a privilege. It is a privilege to be mentally ill or to be, fragile.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
I'm
one of the
I'm
things we
glad
don't.
you know that. It's so weird to hear an American saying that. When I first came to America and I went to college, all my roommates were depressed. All my roommates had anxiety. And I remember asking one of them, "Why are you all depressed?" I couldn't understand.
Right.
Why? You have everything. You have a beautiful family. You have a temple right here from your religion. You can go to church. You have food, clothes, shoes, a phone, internet. You can watch any movie you want. Why are you so sad? I couldn't understand.
I think
Years
that
went by, and I think it's not only genetics, but also society, the kind of society that we have right now in America.
I think it's guilt. I think that it's I have because another thing that used to be very popular among especially women in the predominant the LDS culture of my age was anorexia, bulimia. And so they would just something that I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand it not from coming from another country, but from growing up so poor and in the foster system. I did not understand not being grateful for what you have. When you get the opportunity to change your life, you hang on to that. And the idea that people would just complain did not sit well with me. It still doesn't sit well with me. And I feel like, some people will say, and I don't like it when it's somebody like Elon Omar saying that immigrants are the new true patriots, the new true Americans, whatever. But there is something to say that when people have experienced something, it's very hard to pull the wool over their eyes, right? Like you could never take away your gratitude. And you have been lucky and fortunate since coming to America, but you'll never forget where you came from. And I
Yeah.
think that's, I mean, in a way, like people will say, well, how come you're a grateful person? I'm like, I'm grateful because I was able to get out of where I started, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me. So you've said that you had to write in school. What I would like to do is draw the parallels because you are so committed to teaching kids to love liberty. By kids, I mean youth, college age, and things. Um, you're so committed to doing that. And I think, have you heard the word? I use it a lot, oikophobia.
No.
Okay, oikophobia means the fear or loathing of your home or country.
Mm.
And that, I believe we have a pandemic of that. We have so many people who just hate it, especially if they're white. They just hate America, but also African Americans. They're like, oh, if only I could go back to Africa, life would be, it's called Pan Africanism. They have no idea how unwelcome they would be there. I've spoken to Africans. They're like, we
They're
don't
coming
want
here.
them. So, but they're taught to hate. How are you changing that? Because I know that you are. I've got a few photos here. Let's see. I've got this beautiful one.
Mhm.
Um, and this is when you're speaking to high schoolers, I think, at this one, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
maybe this one too.
Yeah.
This and you know what I love about this? We do very similar things. This is a room full of boys.
Yeah. There's some girls here and there, but
But
mainly boys.
that's the same as it is in my high school class. It is
It's because
filled.
girls are more prominent to leaning towards these emotions that they need to be liberated, that they're oppressed. While boys are more, rational.
Yeah, right. So what do you teach them?
I just share my life, my experience with them, what it was like living in Cuba and what it's like living here now, and how grateful I am, how much I appreciate it. I always try to share a message with them of optimism, of gratefulness, because I really feel like most young people here are not. Like you said, they feel like guilt, they don't want to be here, they hate it here. There's nothing that bothers me more than having friends around me or people around me, Americans born, raised here, making bad comments about the US. Saying things like, yeah, because we're in the US. I'm like, yes, you're in the US. I went through hell to get here. It was awful. You need
Yeah.
to be grateful. And so I see that in young people. They're not grateful. They're always complaining and making up things like, I'm an oppressor, you are the oppressed, and this division in classes and division in everything. And here I always put this example. I have the same cell phone that Kim Kardashian does. We can probably have the same pair of Nikes. She's richer than me, but we can afford pretty much the basic stuff. We all have the same thing, the same toothpaste.
Mhm.
So everybody here in America can have those things. And the most important thing is that you can actually dream of becoming better, of doing something that can get you out of poverty or get you out of a bad situation. I always tell the young people when I speak to them, no matter how bad of a day you have, tomorrow is going to be better. Just because you're free and because you have an opportunity to change it. Even if you're sad today, if you are poor, if you want a pair of shoes that you can afford, tomorrow you can go outside, sell some cookies, sell something else, and you can buy the pair of shoes that you want. There's nothing to be sad about. The only thing that you can be sad about if when somebody dies, you know,
Right.
there's no solution for that. You cannot bring them back. But
Right.
other than that, in the US, pretty much everything has a solution.
I
And
love
we just
that.
have to be grateful for it. We have to look forward to tomorrow. You're not living in Cuba like me when I was so hopeless, and my only goal was to leave the country so that I could actually start living a life. The day I came to the US, I was reborn. I started a new life, a life of freedom, of rights, where every day is a different opportunity that I get to be better and to make it better.
I love that. I want to go into the darker parts, the parts that you're seeing that you're concerned about, the groups that are promoting Cuba and communism as good things. We see that here in Utah. Um, I think the one thing, uh, the armed queers, right? I mean, there's some really dark. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, that's my question. So when I first got here to Utah and I learned about these groups on social media, they just popped on my social media. That's when I started getting involved in this. I wanted to do something about it. When I saw the lies they were telling, not only armed queers, but also the Party for Socialism and Liberation, MECHA, the U of U in University of Utah, the Communist Party in Provo. There's so many groups. So the first thing I did is I print out a lot of evidence of these groups and how they were being indoctrinated in Cuba, how everything worked in Cuba. And, I brought all of these documents to a congressman. I don't know if I can say the name.
You can. Mhm,
Again, okay. Curtis,
mhm.
John Curtis. Back then, he was the congressman. And so I brought it to him, and he said, "How many of you are there?" That's all he asked. And I said, "What do you mean? It's just me. I have another Cuban friend that's here, but who are you representing, and how many are in your group?" "No, I don't have a group. I'm not representing anybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We'll look into it. We'll look into those groups. Yeah, they never did.
I know.
So they didn't care. And that's another reason why I started the nonprofit, to get more young people to show that that there are more young people that care about these issues. I can't just be living here nice in my house, watching a movie right now, relaxing now that my kids are sleeping, while these groups are telling lies about my country and
Right.
are teaching other young people to hate the US. Why?
And
And
taking them on a field trip there, right? They take
yes,
them.
yes. And the worst part, University of Utah also sends young Americans to Cuba every year. And we cannot do anything about it because they do it under the category of education, where they can actually do that. But who is educating these kids? And I know because I'm sorry, I went to a Party for Socialism of Liberation meeting, and they show the picture of who their guide is when they get to Cuba. Is Gerardo Hernandez. He's a Cuban spy that served prison time here in the US.
Wow.
He's their guide. They take these Americans to the nicest part of Cuba, to nice hospitals, and they show them a lie about my country. They spend their 9 days, and they come back here to Utah to teach about how great communism is and how we should implement it here. And
Yeah.
when I, the Cuban one that lived their whole life there, talks to them and explain what reality is like, they don't believe me. They don't approve me because I'm white, because they said that I'm mad at Fidel Castro because Fidel Castro took away my family's plantations, when literally slavery entered in Cuba almost 100 years before communism.
Yeah.
So
It's privilege, and it's brainwashing. A lot of the people who go are white themselves, aren't they? Or do
yes,
yeah. So that assuages them of their guilt because they go and they get to be the saviors of a group of people. But again, like you said, your dad would take people to come and see the real Cuba when they would come. Um, I know I've done that. I've gone on, like, cruises and been like, "Can I see the real part?" And sometimes yes, and sometimes no, but, the the arrogance, I guess the ignorance of a false humility. We're so humble, we're so caring, we're so this, when the reality is you won't even talk to people who actually lived it. And as far as our politicians go, it doesn't surprise me at all. we have politicians, and we have statesmen. And I have found it amazing when I've been able to take somebody who's an asylum seeker, a real asylum seeker, to a good statesman politician, and they're immediately like, "What can I do to help?" But then we have a whole bunch who are, in my opinion, but with some evidence, basically controlled by NGOs. So there's tons of groups all over Utah, which Utah becomes the ideal place because the church is so, the LDS church business is so philanthropic and humanitarian. So it makes it very easy for there to be these little groups of people who it's very frustrating because they say that they're being empathetic and compassionate, but they sure are making a lot of money being empathetic and compassionate. And I think that that is, it's false and it's really harming society. And I don't think they care because I think they, they foolishly believe that all of them are going to be the top level if we in communism.
Yeah.
And they won't be. What always happens in communism is the useful idiots get taken out.
Yeah. Communism always ends in a dictatorship. There's no other way to have it. Because the only, I mean, to have communism, everybody has to give and everybody has to do what you're supposed to do in communism. The only way to achieve that is by a dictatorship, with a dictator that forces people to do it, to give. It's not willingly, you know?
Right.
So if we agree that communism always ends in a dictatorship, then we have a point. But they also say that I never lived in communism, that that was just the revolution towards communism. No, 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 that's what it ends. There's
Oh,
nothing after
right.
that revolution. That's what it ends.
Their whole, yeah. Uh, One of my son's teachers actually said real communism hasn't been tried yet. So, and that became a warning. That became a
Yeah,
tell me everything
that,
every day that happens in that
yeah,
classroom. But I mean, so some of the things that our kids are seeing are they're being shown Al Jazeera videos as if they're truth. Um, we know that there's a Democratic Socialist Party here. Um, and what about, I mean, do you get concerned about the things we're seeing now with kids protesting? Or were you guys past all of that when you were growing up? What I mean by you guys weren't doing it because the revolution had already happened and you lived under it.
yeah, yeah. But when I see those protests here, you can see that they are organized by these groups that go to Cuba, and they most in most protests, if you notice, they have a Cuban flag when there are no Cubans there. I know the few Cubans that are in Utah, and we are all anti-communist. They also have T-shirts that say "Socialism is the way." So the protests are not against ICE only. The protests are not um, against Trump or no kings or whatever. The protests have a definitely um, a meaning to achieve communism here. That's the goal that they have.
I'm
And
just
that really worries me. That really worries me because I can see that they are starting a revolution. That's their goal. When I went to their meeting, the Party for Socialism and Liberation meeting, their goal is to start a revolution here, and they're looking for the smallest thing to happen to bring that revolution.
and I think that's where I got the times of trouble and I got that wrong because there's a thing called beautiful trouble.
Mm,
And beautiful trouble is when something very bad happens and you can take pictures of that and exploit it and say like the little boy who, they claimed was arrested and deported, his name was
yeah,
Liam. When they took, you know, so they take those pictures or the Renee Good or things like that, and they don't care, and I feel like people don't understand that. They don't care if it's your child that gets hit by a car. They don't care, it's just it's useful for the revolution.
it is. They're willing to make up any lie. So why wouldn't they take advantage of any little situation that happens to bring their goal, which is a revolution?
So, how come so many people of faith or so many people who I don't know if they're I don't know if personally, I don't think that you're of faith and you can follow these things, but that's my own opinion. But how come so many churchgoers are falling for all of this? Because there are a lot.
Yeah. I think first of all they're taught to be nice to everybody, love everybody, and when they learn that, they think that they have to be, you know, it's like love the sinner but not the sin. So just like they support abortion in the name of, oh, we have to love everybody and women have rights, and there is the same with communism. They think that communism is a replica of the law of consecration. They're confusing it,
Okay.
the law of consecration, and they
Do you want to explain that a little bit? Because there's a lot of people um, who won't know what
don't
that
know what
is.
it is. The law of consecration is basically when Jesus comes back and we all live the same, we're all the same, and there's no poorers, no riches, or no difference in between us,
Okay.
and we can all benefit from each other's products or labor or
Okay.
something like that. So when they think of communism, they think that communism is the law of consecration. And I don't know if everybody listening is very religious, but I believe that communism is the plan that Satan has to deceive the people. Because if you read the scriptures, you learn that Satan always wants to confuse the people and use some truths and deceive them. So communism has some things very similar to the law of consecration, where we all give, and the difference is that under communism we don't do it willingly. We do it forcibly because somebody, a dictator, forces us to do it. While under the law of consecration, we do it because we want to. We want to give. We want to be nice. In reality, you cannot do that. Like I said before, you can never force or make everybody in a nation think the same way. That's impossible.
And again, I just want to hit the hypocrisy of the people who push this on everybody. For an example, we just had a bill where we said we would like taxpayers to not have to pay for illegals. And people said no, they should have to. Well, come to find out, the majority of the people who went to the Capitol and could afford to show up were the owners of the NGOs. They're making a lot of money. The smallest NGO that I've seen makes 162,000 or had 162,000 left over this year.
Wow.
Okay, so they're making a lot. And I'm not saying every NGO is bad, but I do kind of have an issue with taxpayers not being able to know where their money is going. I mean, we're literally paying for our own demise, and that is insane to me. But the other thing is the profit that these people who are standing there virtue signaling are making while they're saying we need to do this in the name of God. So much of the arguments on this was, well, Jesus would want you to. That disgusts me.
Yeah,
I, that is, in my opinion, fully using God's name in vain.
yeah,
It's utterly lying. Did they use the word liberated? Did they tell you that you were liberated when you were in
yeah. Of course, they said we were liberated from oppression, from colonialism, from the U.S. imperialism, so and so.
you were liberated to starve?
But we were actually not free
Right.
at all.
Um, just a few more things that I want to clarify. You said that you weren't allowed to worship, but the churches were open because the stereotype that we see as Americans is you look at Latin countries and you see Catholicism, beautiful cathedrals and everything else. They weren't closed down. Were they just basically, I know that in some countries what happens is that the state comes in and it tells you what you will preach at the pulpit. Was it like that or were they just gone?
They basically threaten you that if you went to church, you could lose your job or you could go to jail, because the churches back then, they were very pro freedom. So they knew what communism was like and what was coming for the country. And so the church leaders were speaking always against communism.
Yeah.
That's why the state tried to oppress them and persecute them and all that.
Okay.
And, nowadays, yes, everybody can go and worship, but it's too late. Nobody believes in anything. There's no faith.
Okay. Which I feel like a lot of people lost their faith when the churches were closed down just for 2 years during the pandemic.
When
Um,
you don't go to church, you forget, you don't practice, and you stop feeling the spirit. So
yeah. And then the other thing that you talked about, and I think this is a big one, I feel it every single day. I don't know about you, but censorship. You said that you had no freedom to say what you thought. And I feel like that's something that we're definitely experiencing here too. A lot of censorship, like even censorship. Am I in a safe place to say what I really think?
that's why I asked you before if I could say the name of the congressman, because lately, whenever I'm invited to a podcast, there are some things I cannot say. So I
I'm
always
not that
ask.
person. Right, right. Exactly. Well, hey, at least they'll have you. Me, they
That's,
just label as that far right extremist. And I'm like,
yeah.
the majority of my people are classically liberal, right? Like that's who I talk to, that's who I reach because I don't fit all the way over here. And I definitely don't fit anywhere over here. So, um, yeah, the whole how do you navigate that? How do you navigate that when you've got so much truth to tell and people tell you there's certain things you're not allowed to say?
It hurts me, and I've actually cried a few times about it. I feel like a little kid inside my heart just trying to scream, ah, and they don't let them. That's what it feels like. And I have recorded podcasts. I have been interviewed for news articles for Desert News that were never published because of what I said, because of me talking about these groups. Right before the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I tried exposing the armed queers in a presentation for a big group of young people. They didn't let me put that picture in there because it could offend the queer staff or students. And it's very frustrating because if I had said something, maybe when the assassination happened, people would have been already aware of who
Right?
this group was, and it could have been a bigger deal. But
It was
right
this
now,
no, I thought it immediately. That's
yeah,
exactly what I thought. I was like, there's no way they're not involved.
yeah,
And the fact that you can't say it when it's like they use that title. And the title we're talking about, you guys, is Armed Queers. So we have our Armed Queers of Salt Lake City. And their pages came down as soon as Charlie was killed.
yes.
So when certain people like to run off and tell a bunch of different stories, there's another story that is so clear and close to home. It doesn't make any sense that that's not touched.
Well, and the reason why I was trying to expose them, it wasn't because they were queer or armed. It was because they used the communist symbol in every post.
Yeah,
So I was trying to explain to the youth, be careful about these groups that have other names, but in reality, they're communists and they're aiming for a revolution. That's what I was trying to do to
right,
warn them. I wasn't going to talk about people's sexuality or, their sexual preferences. I don't care about that.
right.
How could that offend somebody if they're calling themselves communists?
To me, it's the
Or
armed. To me, it's the armed. When I saw that, because because that picture that you and other people have with that little dirty fingernail, that's mine.
oh
So,
yeah.
like, I took the picture in Salt Lake when I first saw it because I was going to my son's concert, and those posters were all over. They just stuck them on street signs everywhere. And so I grabbed one and I was like, "What the heck is this?" In Salt Lake, in Utah. And it's not a gentle picture.
No.
No, the picture has a person holding their big old gun, and the thing is that in terms of brainwashing, as you said, you had brainwashing in school. Well, when kids are taught in their clubs that either America is bad or all white people are bad, and they're taught specifically that conservatives would like to create a genocide, of course they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And the fact that that's actually taught in clubs,
It's scary.
it's wrong.
And it's wrong.
I
Yeah.
mean, these are kids, they're extremely impressionable, especially if your teacher is cool, hip or brings donuts. You know? So,
Um,
if you do any of those things, they are very, they'll melt for you. And I know that. I teach this age of kids. But when you tell them a lie like you were taught, I mean, so you dreamed about America, but when you were little, you thought America was a bad place.
yeah. I thought they were the biggest enemies of our country, that they were going to come and kill me. And but I had my parents at home that told me, no, America is nice, so we have to leave. You're not free here. And then I was like, who do I believe? It was, and that's the same thing that happens here in the U.S. Us moms that have, maybe moms that have kids that go to school like you, we're worried that our kids are being taught lies that could grow hate in their hearts, and that hate could grow so much that they could even harm themselves. They could hate themselves and harm themselves or harm other people. And that's so scary for a mother, for a
Yes,
family.
and you have little tiny ones. So, have you even thought about things like school choice? Have you thought about, like, homeschool? And
Yes,
because I do feel that if Utah doesn't correct course, like, my personal feeling in my son's school is that they probably know I'm watching. Like, they're like,
yeah,
"Oh, there she is," because 'cause I'm
yeah,
not quiet about it.
mm,
Um, so I feel like it's been toned down. However, there are things being taught in school that are subtle if you don't know what you're looking for. But when I go to a concert and the song is about no fences and how originally there were never any borders, and we should get back to that time, and then the kids stomp their feet at the end and say, "No fences!" I think we should get a little bit like, what's going on here? Because they don't even know they're being taught it. And I to me, it seems like they've put socialism in the schools already. Like schools are already socialist,
Marxists. Yeah,
Marxist. But here's the thing, the teachers don't know it. I've had teachers say, I don't know what you're talking about. I've had relatives say, I appreciate that you're trying to do this, but I've never even heard of Karl Marx. So but you can adopt his policies without ever hearing his name. If you've heard the basic things, if you've heard somebody's the oppressed and somebody's the oppressor, you have been introduced to Marx.
exactly. As
So,
simple as it sounds.
yeah, and I don't know, that's a hard one. I just want to look through and see what we have in comments. People were like, "Nice, back again. Thank you." Oh, good. I can still see the original. Said, "I've always been curious, why can't you just leave Cuba?" Can people
They
leave
didn't.
today? Can anyone just leave today or no?
No, you're not allowed to just leave. You need to have a legal way to leave.
Okay,
You cannot buy a ticket and go to Egypt to look at the pyramids. You're not allowed to do that.
okay.
Can do tourism around the world, can learn about the world, what the world looks like. Because when you come back, you might be a problem for the government. But it also makes the government look bad to see so many people leaving and staying in other countries. Most of the people from my class in high school, they are spread all over the world. They're in Italy, Dubai, um, in Turkey, in Spain, Portugal, Mexico, Uruguay, US. We're all over the place. Everybody left.
If they
So
had a chance to not now, are they all on your side? I know that we have ran into people because we both are part of Moms for America, and we ran into situations where you have to vet people because there are some people who just, um, either wanna be in the spotlight or whatever else, but they don't necessarily love America. Let's hit that before we get off. How come people come here, have a totally different life, have all of these opportunities, and still choose to despise America?
I
How
don't
does that
understand.
happen?
I don't know. No
What do
idea. That's a fight that I have every day with someone, with somebody. It's so frustrating. Like if you choose to come here, be grateful. And even people from my family. I have members of of my family that have come here illegally, and even after they did, they gave birth in a hospital. They didn't have to pay $1 for it. They were
Wow.
given diapers, everything they needed for the baby, and right now they're speaking trash about ICE, about immigration law, about as if they were the experts of law. When in Cuba, you're not taught law, you're not taught politics, economics. How you come here to this foreign country that opened their doors to you, even though you came uninvited, gave you everything for free,
That's
and now
why.
you're complaining about it.
I think that that's why, because when you foster dependency, you'll do anything to keep your dependency alive. When it is something that you had to work for, earn, and struggle for, it's different. But when you come across and somebody is standing there, especially going back to those NGOs, and says, a lot of the NGOs have like pamphlets that say why being a Democrat is good for you. Um, I know I know of a very close experience of somebody who, a young woman who believes that uh, Biden is for them, immigrants, and Trump is for Americans. Why does a teenager believe this? Because they've been taught to. Where? More than likely the program that's sponsoring them.
Yeah. The difference is that the Democrats play a lot with immigrants' feelings. They promise you things, they say they're for you, but at the end of the day, they don't do anything for you. The biggest example that you have of this is how the past 4 years, the Biden administration implemented so many different immigration programs and ways for people to get here legally. Because, yes, they would have the CBP One app where they schedule their illegal entry into the
Right.
US and called that a legal entry when it was
Right.
literally not. But so many programs, also the humanitarian parole program, where there was not one question in that application about the humanitarian situation of the person to come here. So you have communists here that came legally with the humanitarian parole and so on. So, but well, my point is that, for example, this parole lasted 2 years only. That was so smart of them to do. That way, they let people come in legally, have a work permit, driver license, social security, government aid, and all that, and right when Trump got into power, the humanitarian parole was going to expire, whether or not Trump eliminated it. So now Trump is the bad guy. The
Yeah.
Republicans are the bad people because we're the ones that are implementing the law, enforcing the law, following Biden's law, also to deport everybody that don't have a legal status anymore. Now we're the bad ones. So they were
Well, and
very smart
I
with
don't
what they
believe
did.
they thought that they were going to lose. I really don't think so. And I think that with what they're teaching the kids in education, I don't think that they expect to lose again. Because when our kids have ethnic studies, when our kids are literally taught to dismantle the systems, which sounds to me like the same thing that other countries have been teaching, they've just basically imported the same things that you guys learned in terms of America bad, right?
Mhm.
So they're going to vote for their own demise. Um, the thing that I've found that's been interesting is that a lot of times when the immigrants are brought here, they are put into the poorest communities. But that's because they can take over. And so that community that's starting to wake up, specifically the African American community, as it starts to wake up and it starts to go, my kids can't play in the gym because there's a bunch of illegals sleeping in the gym. Or they see, people in much nicer hotels than they travel to that they're allowed to stay in, right?
Yep.
That seeds resentment and causes a little bit of a war, a little bit of that revolutionary energy, which it's all kind of a part of that plan. Um, so I guess my final question, because yeah, I think we're doing good. This time I tried to stay an hour. My final question is, what do you think we can best do to help people wake up who are either newcomers or who have been here for a while? Because we focus on the kids, but we really need to focus on these people who may be able to vote probably before they should.
Are you talking about immigrants?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Well, I personally, I am planning to do more events with immigrants to teach them about America and about loving America. I think Moms for America, the Spanish side is doing a good job on that aspect as well, teaching Spanish speaker moms how to love America and be grateful for this country. Um, Other than that, I think social media really helps. You know, just talking to family members or friends every time you get a chance. Every time I meet somebody that speaks Spanish, I always share my experience with them because I know they probably didn't come from Cuba. They have a different life experience. Um, and I always try to share my life experience and what was like living in Cuba, what it's like living here. I feel like that actually helps a lot.
Yeah.
You know, it's just we have a lot to do, a lot of work to do to implement that patriotic feeling and love for America and the immigrant community, because the Democrats didn't leave it easy for us.
Yeah. No, 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 no. They've mastered it. I think that that's a big one is social media. I was listening to somebody say, I don't, social media isn't worth it, but it actually is because
Yeah.
that's where so many people are. And so it's very hard for somebody like me who can easily talk to somebody for an hour or two to cut it down to a minute and a half.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
But
It's hard. Yeah.
that's, I mean, we have to do what's hard. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, well, that doesn't seem that hard. It is. It is really very much. All right, tell us where people can follow you, how they can support you. And yeah.
Okay, so the nonprofit that I founded is called Youth for Liberty, and you can look up the website youthforliberty.org. Also on Instagram, youth.for liberty. And I also have a personal Instagram account that is called Gabby Politics Matter, where I also post a lot of contents about not only my nonprofit, but also everything that's going on in America and the similarities that I find between Cuba and the situation here right now. I share about my life experience in Cuba in a hope for people to realize actually what they have here, how good they have it. I feel like that's working. So if everybody can go follow me, support me, share my message, that would be really helpful.
And you guys, she does really good content. So I hope that you'll follow her and support her. And um, just if you will do me the favor of liking and sharing this, we are, I don't know if we're shadow banned or whatever, but yeah, somebody said, I hope your page grows. So do I. And again, I never do this because I want to be an influencer. I do it because I want to have influence. I want to change the world, especially for our young people. I want them to hear the truth and to not make the same mistakes that history has showed us are just disastrous. Gabby, thank you so much for joining me. Sorry for the first part.
Don't worry about it.
I so appreciate you. And I'll see you on Friday, right?
Yes, I'll see
Yes.
you.
Wonderful. Have a great day. Thanks,
You too.
everybody. We appreciate you staying with us. Bye bye.
Bye bye.